Hey everyone, Xerath Diff here, and today we are going to be looking at a support Xerath build for patch 14.10. This is going to be focused on the inspiration tree, and we're going to do another one that's going to be focused on the sorcery tree. So the sorcery tree one is going to go Comet, and this one is going to go First Strike, and we're going to look at some of the new runes and the pairings you can do, and yeah, we'll hop right into it. So obviously we'll be taking First Strike, and they made some significant changes to this rune. This patch. So it used to be 70% of your range damage gets converted to gold. Now it's 35%, but you only used to get 5 gold for just hitting an ability at all, and now you get 10 gold basically. And as far as I know, they didn't change the cooldown or anything of that sort. So basically, they've just shifted the gold generating power from kind of like the later game to the earlier game. Like now you're getting more gold earlier on for doing less damage, and you're getting less gold like later on for doing more damage. It's kind of like the way you can look at it. They also increased the damage of the rune slightly by 1% from 7 to 8%. So that's kind of good, but not really super significant. And I think somebody was doing the math on Twitter, and they said it breaks down to like you're getting around the same goal, like where it breaks even to before is like you're getting more gold up until about 300 and some raw damage. So you're definitely going to be getting more gold early, and on a champion like Xerath, the cool thing about this is you have an access to safer gold, I think, right? Whereas like before, it was more important after you hit a certain level, at least, to hit your combo, right? Because I would say your combo in this case just includes your WQ. If you hit your E, that would be obviously even better, but for most cases, we'd be just talking about WQ. But yeah, hitting your combo is like kind of important, right? Because you're getting 2 abilities worth of damage down instead of 1, and a lot of your gold generation was based on the damage. And in like harder matchups where it's not as safe to maybe throw out your W and try and hit that combo after a certain point, you're going to have an easier time kind of generating gold because you just need to proc your First Strike basically. And I think that's kind of like what this is going to transition to the laning phase. This is going to be very similar if you play this to kind of like the old support item, right? Where the only way you could get rid of charges on the old support item if you did like Spell Thieves was you had to basically hit the enemy champion, right? Or hit a tower or something like that. Because if you just hit the minions, it wouldn't actually consume charges like it does now with the current support item. So it's kind of going to be like that with First Strike. As soon as you get your proc back up, you're going to want to use it, right? You're not going to want to be necessarily focused around, am I going to be able to optimize the damage here? You just kind of want to get it down and move on to the next proc, get that timer ticking. So I think that this, kind of complements the play style of Xerath, especially in the harder matchups, which is nice. It's just, what is the actual differential going to be in the early game, right? We're kind of going to have to play test it and see like how much more gold we wind up with, basically. And obviously, it's just probably strictly worse later on. So we'll have to see like how much gold we end games with. I kind of have an idea of how much gold I end games with now, so I'll be able to kind of compare that and let you guys know. I think for most games, it's anywhere from like 600 to 1.2k gold. So it's kind of a large variance depending on what goes on, but I'll definitely be keeping an eye on that. And I think either way, I'm not super disappointed here because I think that the Comet build on Xerath is also very strong, which we're going to make a video about. So in the event that this just feels bad and doesn't feel good to play with, it's not really any sweat off my back because I will just transition to playing the Comet build, right? It's not the end of the world for me, but we will definitely test this out quite a bit and see how it is. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the First Strike change. I definitely think it could be good. The thing that I like is that if we can get any sort of more substantial amount of gold generation early, that's just going to be really good to help make up for losing futures market. And obviously, I think hitting your first power spike on the champion, which I would consider to be your support item complete, your boots, and your Luden's Companion is I think that's like, like really good. So the quicker you can get to that, the better. So I like that about First Strike and getting more gold with it early. As well as they buffed Luden's Companion. Keep in mind, so getting to that first power spike is going to feel more impactful as well. So I have high hopes, but we're just going to have to see how it plays out in game. But I would definitely recommend probably trying this out at least. Now, let's get into the first tier of runes. Okay, so we have the Tried and True Magical Footwear, and we have Cashback. So I think Magical Footwear is like a very, very strong rune, especially on Xerath. The rune is strong in general, 300 gold for a minor rune, and then 10 additional movement speed, which carries over to the whatever boots you build beyond the base boots. It's really good. The problem with it typically is that it's like what is baked in here in terms of a drawback is the fact that you can't buy the boots earlier, right? And to give you an example, I have a cousin that plays Udyr jungle, and we've talked about this rune before. He really understands the the value of the rune just in and of itself in terms of like it's really strong rune in that sense. But the issue he has with it is the fact that being denied that flexibility on a champion like Jungle Udyr to just be able to build your boots when you feel like you need them kind of really sucks, right? And I feel like in most cases on Xerath, you don't really have that same problem, barring maybe laning against particular threats like maybe a Blitzcrank or something like that, right? But in most cases, you're not really going to be hamstrung by not having boots to the same degree as a champion that really thrives on mobility, like something like Udyr. So you can kind of get away with not building them for a bit and just getting them for free essentially with the Magical Footwear, right? So I think Xerath tends to kind of like circumnavigate that issue that kind of balances out this rune. So this is just all positive for him, and I think it's just really strong, obviously. Now we're going to compare it against Cashback because that's the main competition, I would say, in this tier, and because we're not taking Hex Flash on Xerath. So let's look at this. Well, first of all, what's a legendary item? So legendary item is like, Luden's, Liandry's, Void Staff, etc. Boots are not legendary items. Dark Seal is not a legendary item, although Magi's is a legendary item. You can easily see what's tagged as a legendary item if you just go into the game and start looking at items. They have a tag, I believe, or you can go on the wiki as well, right? So it should be pretty easy for you to tell what is a legendary item and what is not. A support item does not count as a legendary item, so you're not getting any sort of gold when finishing the support item. But so let's do the math on like an average purchase, right? So an average item, let's say, is like 3k for a damage item. So it's 180 gold you're basically getting back per 3k item. And on Xerath, you're normally buying like a 2900 item in Luden's, and then I would build Liandry's next, but most people would probably build Horizon Focus. That's a 2700 item. So, you're not necessarily gaining exactly 180 gold, but it's pretty close, right? So after one item, it's 180 gold approximately. After two items, it's like probably 350 gold total, 340 some gold if you have a Luden's and a Horizon Focus. So you're thinking like, okay, well, after two items, this beats out Magical Footwear, right? And, hey, I normally get two items in a game, so this is the better rune, right? At least when you compare it straight up gold-wise and you're not factoring in the 10 additional MS. However, I think it's a bit more complicated than that. So the way I like to look at it, right, is that when you get Magical Footwear, you're getting the 300 gold. Like, as soon as those boots come online, which is at worst case 12 minutes, you get a 300 gold injection, which essentially jumpstarts you for the rest of the game, right? Like, that 300 gold, you got it all at once in a lump sum, and it just puts you 300 gold ahead for the entire rest of the game. Now, how Cashback works is a little different, because it doesn't actually jumpstart you at all until you're starting to build your second item. Right, so nothing about this rune is going to help you get a single item faster, like your first item, essentially, right? Like Magical Footwear is going to do. You're just going to get your item 300 gold sooner if you get magical footwear. And remember, you don't have the flexibility now of having something like futures market. Okay, so in some sense, having your item cost like less gold essentially by being given more gold for free is even more important, because you don't have a way to like get that item any quicker. Now you have to buy it with the gold you have, so having the gold on hand is even more important. And the other thing you have to take into account with this item is that when the game is going to end, I think, is a good way to look at this, right? So, and again, this really plays into the hands of magical footwear, because with magical footwear, it doesn't matter when the game ends, as long as it's like past like 15 or 20 minutes, right? Because that gold was given to you, it's helped you like ever since then, right? But let's say you do finish 2 items with cashback, okay? But the game ends like 3 minutes after you get your second item, or something like that, right? So you technically got like 350 gold from the rune, but did that extra like close to 180 gold on the back end to get after you bought the second item, did that really do anything for you? Like at most that let you get like one component, right? Like a small component or something like that. So yeah, like I think that this rune was like intended to be, it's obviously trying to kind of capture something about futures market, but it doesn't really end up capturing anything about it, because futures market was just so strictly better in the sense that it allowed you to get items sooner, right? And in some cases, like you wouldn't even mind paying the fee, because if the game was gonna, it's like the opposite of this, right? Whereas like if you bought your second item with futures market, okay, and then the game ended, that was huge value for you, basically, right? You basically got an extra, basically like probably 300-ish gold, depending on the point in the game, or 200 and something gold, right? You could think of it like that, essentially. Whereas in this, and you get the item sooner, right? So you had the item, you were able to be more effective for longer in that game, starting sooner. Whereas with this, you get the item, not sooner at all, and that extra gold is basically just kind of like, it's not really going into anything special, because you're not going to have time to build the next item. And like I said, you're at most just going to get a component out of it. So I think that this rune looks kind of like really good at first when you compare it in a raw sense to magical footwear. But I think that magical footwear in most cases just tends to be better. On support, I typically don't end up buying more than 3 real items in a game. I feel like, well, maybe 3 and then Magias. So, this would help me in those games, but you have to ask the question, like, well, is the game like already over by the time you get the third item most of the time? You know what I mean? So there's a lot of considerations to kind of like take into account here, obviously. And I think I'm probably going to go with magical footwear, at least to start off. Maybe I'll do some testing with cashback, but I think I'm just going to like magical footwear more for the acceleration aspect, especially because Ludens is better, right? So getting to Ludens quicker with boots and the support item is just going to feel so much better, I think, than getting a bit of extra gold back once I finish the Ludens. On something like mid Xerath, I could see this being maybe a bit more enticing, right? Because you're going to probably buy more items throughout the course of the game, so you get more value out of it. And at that point, it just kind of becomes like a scaling thing, right? Where, like, obviously the longer the game goes, the better it performs versus something like magical footwear. But for the most part, and for most cases, on something like support Xerath specifically, I'm sticking with magical, I believe. So I'll update you on that, but those are my preliminary thoughts. Now, getting into the next set of runes, triple tonic, and then we have the other tonic, and then we have biscuits. So, in my opinion, like, triple tonic is by far the best one out of here. The middle one, having your potions apply their effect, like 40% of it immediately, it doesn't really do much for me, because you're not going to be like a super deep in combat champion. I feel like that's kind of like what that's trying to be, is like it give you the utility of like, oh, if I need to get more out of the potion, because I'm in a combat situation, I can. Xerath is mostly, you're engaging fights over the long haul, obviously, right? And the cases in which you are going to need to emergency potion, you're probably still going to die, I would say, in most cases. So, not really a fan of that rune. And then the biscuits, they just don't do enough, in my opinion. And even the permanent mana they give you is not very good. It's like the equivalent of like 1 additional Q. So, yeah, I'm going to pass on both of those and get Triple Tonic. And the first elixir on Triple Tonic, you think it's not the best, but it gives you like 40 gold. So 40 gold's 40 gold. Can't really argue with that. And then the level 6 elixir is kind of interesting because I feel like Xerath does struggle in the early game, and I think what I'm going to try and do is pair this with like once I get my ult around level 6, right? So I'm going to pair it for like a dragon fight. Like if there's going to be a fight, I'm going to pop it beforehand, have it do a bit of extra damage on my ult, because at that point you're multiplying the effect of the additional AP, right? Because you're getting like 4 shots, and then you obviously still have your Q and your W. So if you use this without your ult, you basically have 2 damaging abilities and 1 very weak CC ability, since it's kind of like under-leveled, weak in terms of the damage it actually deals. Versus if you are using this with your ult, you have your W and Q, and then obviously you have the effect on the 4 of the shots as well. So I think in some sense, like this could be good on Xerath for sure. Especially you could use it trying to finish off somebody who's kind of low, right? It definitely has application. It's not the best thing. I don't know if I was designing a specific rune, I wouldn't make this, but it's not the worst. And I think obviously the best part of Triple Tonic is the level 9 thing, the Elixir of Skill. And this, in my opinion, is particularly good on support because, as support, you're not really reaching the end game, like level 18 in most games. So it's pretty much useful throughout the game. And unlike other champions, Xerath doesn't really have an ability that's like a third ability that's relatively weak to level up. Like there's some champions where they have a utility ability where basically just leveling it up lowers the cooldown, which is good, but it doesn't really affect the potency of the ability itself. That's not the case for Xerath, because his stun deals damage at every rank, right? So, and the level where you're going to get this, you're actually going to use it on your W. So basically you're getting an additional W rank early, which is really good because your W does incredible damage, especially if you are able to hit it in the center, right? So you're not only getting an extra rank, but you may actually get an extra rank of a center rank W, which is really, really strong. And then even once you pass that and you have all the levels in your W, you're still theoretically have gained a level on your E, right, up until level 18. So yeah, just like a really strong ability on a damage champion, in my opinion. It definitely helps shore up the problem you have on support, where AP support in particular, where your abilities are damage based, but you're level restricted, right? So yeah, that's just really, really strong in my opinion, and I'm looking forward to playing with that. I think it'll be cool. I haven't played with that yet, really. So yeah, let's move on to the next, the last tier here, which is Escape Velocity, Cosmic Insight, and then Jack of All Trades. So currently, if I'm going Inspiration, I typically just go Cosmic Insight. I'm not a huge fan of Escape Velocity on Xerath. I just don't think it's quite as good as on Vel'Koz. I think that mostly has to do with like Vel'Koz's Q having the slow on it, and the slow being a relatively long slow. And like the range you can kind of use that, and kind of just how it comes out in general. I think it's like much easier to hang in the fights, like get a little bit closer, use that Q as almost kind of like a boxer's stiff jab to kind of like deter people coming into you. And I feel like it's just a lot easier to mitigate that as Xerath, right? Like you have to be a lot more careful trying to mix it up and getting close to your W on Xerath. And there definitely can be application here in terms of it allowing you to maybe get a little bit more range on your Q, because you have a little bit more movement speed, right? Or something like that, or maybe like land a stun in a case where you wouldn't be able to before. So I'm not saying that it's like a completely bad rune, but I just don't find that it helps me out as much on Xerath as it does on Vel'Koz. So I tend to take Cosmic Insight, and Cosmic Insight is it's fine. It's obviously just neutral game stuff like Flash CD. The problem I have is, like, in my opinion, you use Flash reactively a lot on Xerath. Like, you're not obviously Flash engaging, although Flash Q can be potent. It's something that people don't necessarily expect. Although, like, as you get higher in the ladder, like, if you, for example, if you're like a Plat or Emerald player, you might be able to, like, catch people off guard with Flash Q, but, like, as you get higher, they tend to be more aware of these, like, abilities that you can buffer and stuff like that. So it's not quite as good. Still has some use, though, right? But even then, you're not really, like, coming close to flashing on cooldown. And I think in a lot of games, the Cosmic Insight is just not the difference for me, right? Like, it's not, I'm not like, oh, wow, I was able to avoid this gank because I had Cosmic Insight and my flash was still up and it wouldn't have been up before. It's just very rare that actually happens. So I think I'm looking forward to testing out Jack of all trades. And have a video on this that I put up for Lux. It kind of applies to Xerath as well. It's just that the build path to actually get the 25 bonus adaptive force is, it's a bit trickier on Xerath, I think. I don't know that I really want to go the build that's required to unlock that. However, even just having the 10 adaptive force and like the 9 ability haste would probably be pretty decent. The ability haste is kind of nice on like your ult and stuff. The only issue is that you're kind of unlocking it piecemeal, little by little, and you're not going to have even the full 9 ability haste until a little bit later on. But you will have 8 ability haste pretty soon, so it's kind of like the same. You know what I mean? To be honest, you'll have most of the ability haste when you finish your core, which is just like Luden, support item, and boots, right? So I think there's definitely still some application here, and especially on the build that I tend to go, which is ability haste light, having like an additional 7 or 8 more ability haste will just feel better, because we don't have as much of it to begin with. And then the extra AP is very minuscule, but it's better than nothing. So I think I'm definitely going to be trying Jack of all trades. I look at it kind of like you get to take the 10% CDR from the sorcery tree, right? But you get to take it in this, and you get a little bit of extra AP on top. That's kind of how I'm viewing it. So I'm excited to try it out. I'm not expecting it to be amazing or anything, but yeah, I think it'll be better than what we're used to. So that'll be good. And that's basically the inspiration tree. So what are we going to pair this with is the question, right? And for me, the first thing I think about is when I'm looking to pair inspiration with something on Xerath is we're picking something with mana. Now, I've tried playing Xerath without any mana runes before, and it just does not feel good to me. So, for example, I've tried going Domination second, and I just don't like it. I think Domination, in general, is a bit overhyped, I would say. People tend to say that they really like Ultimate Hunter. My problem with Ultimate Hunter is in the games where you need it, it's not coming online like how you want it. The good thing about it, I would say, though, is that Xerath does have great potential to kind of unlock. He has like pretty good potential in terms of unlocking the stacks of it. It's kind of like a Karthus situation. It's not quite as good, obviously, but he does have a lot of flexibility there in terms of being able to actually get the stacks. So if your team is not getting completely stomped, it shouldn't be that hard, theoretically, to get a reasonable amount of stacks somewhat early. But again, in those games where things are going kind of like really bad, it can be hard to get stacks, and those are the games where you're gonna like really need your ult more in general, right? So I feel like it's kind of like one of those win more buttons sometimes. But the real problem I have with going domination is that you don't have any mana, and I'm not gonna lie to you and say that like mana flow band is the greatest thing ever. You know, when you take it, it solves like all your mana problems, and you can just spam all of your abilities in lane. Because it's not like that at all. But I do think either taking Presence of Mind or Mana Flow Band gives you a bit of a buffer that you don't have before, which is kind of nice. And the passive regen on Mana Flow Band, no matter what, is like particularly good in my opinion. You'll kind of end up in these situations sometimes if you don't have any mana runes at all, where you're just like really low on mana, and at that point you basically have to go back and give up pressure. Whereas sometimes if you have Mana Flow Ban, in any individual case where you are it's already going to feel bad, but the whole thing is the process into which you get takes longer, and you're able to throw out a couple more spells on the way there, plus you already get 250 mana on top of everything, right? So that's basically 2 additional Qs just in itself, then the Qs that you're going to be able to generate from regen and stuff like that. So I think that the thing with Mana Flow Ban for me is like it kind of gives you those scenarios where, you know, like you can't really be dove now because you still have mana. You can still contribute to a gank because you still have mana. At any given time, even if you're super low on mana, and if you have your ult up, you can regen to your ult to be able to use your ult faster and contribute in areas like that, right? There's just a lot of good things with having something like Mana Flow Band, where it just makes you, it just activates you a little bit quicker, gives you a bit more sustain in the lane, and it's not like something that's super crazy. I would never try and argue that it's like, you know, it's going to allow you to just free cast everything, but it does make a difference in my opinion, from having play tested it, and I really just don't prefer playing without it. So I either take that or Presence of Mind, and we'll kind of get into precision in a second, but we're going to cover sorcery first. So for that slot in sorcery, I would definitely take Mana Flow Band. And then the next slot is kind of interesting. So there's Scorch, Absolute Focus, Transcendence, which is the 10 ability haste, and then you have Gathering Storm. Now, I think that a lot of these are sort of viable here. The one that I really don't like, to be honest, is Absolute Focus, honestly, which is the one that I see people tend to take. And I think the reason why I don't like it is because it doesn't really add anything novel. It kind of just adds like more damage, and it's not necessarily like a super strong amount of damage. Like it has nothing to do with the needing to be full health or not full health, but above a certain percentage, because most of the time you will be, so that's not really a problem. It just has more to do with the fact that it doesn't really provide that much damage, and it's just providing ability power, right? For example, like I'd rather, if I'm going to have a low amount of ability haste or ability power, I would rather have the ability haste, which is why I take the ability haste rune here. We'll get into that in a second. And it's not giving me the damage of Scorch, at least not like early, right? And it's not giving me the late damage of Gathering Storm. And then, so it's not giving me the late damage of Gathering Storm. It's not giving me the ability haste and the extra ult CD of Transcendence, and it's not giving me the early damage of Scorch. So it's kind of like in the middle, and kind of like just mediocre, in my opinion. There's also sometimes the case where you will get wounded in a fight, like somebody will jump on you, you're able to flash out or something, or you're able to peel for yourself, or somebody's able to peel for you, and you're kind of creating space, and you don't really have time to base and then come back and ult or something. You need to go right into your ult, and if that's the case, you basically don't have this rune for your ult now, right? Because you're under the threshold in most cases. So yeah, I think also like the people might say that like, well, you know, Scorch doesn't really do that much, but I feel like the thing with Scorch is your early laning is so bad that Scorch kind of helps keep them honest, and Absolute Focus will basically do nothing in that situation, right? Because first of all, it has to go through your AP ratio, right? And then whatever is being contributed to your spell from the AP ratio on your Q, then also gets mitigated by the magic resist, right? Whereas the Scorch is just hitting the magic resist and it's doing way more base damage, essentially. So, yeah. I think for the early game, Scorch is just unequivocally better, and that's something I'm trying to shore up a lot of the time. I basically just want to have a fighting chance in lane. I want people to be able to feel like when I hit them, they have to respect me, is the thing, because that's a big problem that Xerath has, I think, where his damage is so weak early game that if you don't try and augment it at all, for a lot of matchups and certain champions, they can just kind of like walk all over you. Like a Rakan is like a great example. And, is Scorch always going to be the difference in matchups like that? Probably not, but in some of them I feel like it kind of can be a little bit. So that's why I tend to take Scorch. But I think I would either take Scorch or Gathering Storm here. Those would be my two go-tos if I had to choose. Now, on the topic of precision. So obviously I take Presence of Mind for the mana rune, but the cut down is interesting because before I never liked taking cut down. Well, actually, originally I used to take cut down all the time because Liandry's didn't have any HP on it, and I think the support item had even less HP. So what I would do is I would, and you actually, before you had a choice of taking health runes, or you could take resistance runes. So I would actually take resistance runes. I would not build into health at all, and I would just have the little bit of health from the support item, and then maybe the Dark Seal. And I would pretty much be at that 15% damage differential versus pretty much every champion I was fighting against because they pretty much built more HP than me, and even if they didn't, I was levels down, right? So the only thing I probably didn't have the full 15% damage against was like 80 carries or like really, really squishy mages. But even mages, they'd play in mid lane, so I probably was close to that 15% damage threshold. So this was like a super valuable rune in some versions of the game. But then they made it so the support item kind of has like 200 health on it, right? And then the problem is like your other options for runes now are not as good, in my opinion, as opposed to scaling health. So you kind of run into this issue where you're kind of griefing yourself to boost your cut down damage. That's how it used to be in like the last patch, essentially, the patch we're currently in. And then I also like to build Liandry's now, as you could tell from the last video. That has health on it, so it just didn't really work. I have to go a different build path there. It didn't work on support specifically. On mid, it was fine, mostly because you didn't have the support item and stuff like that, right? But particularly on support, it was kind of bad because you already started with that plus 200. And it wouldn't really let me build what I wanted to build. But now it's interesting because it just does 8% more damage to champions who have more than 60% health. And this is kind of good because I feel like in a lot of cases you are first contact, like when you're in mid and you're kind of roaming around trying to poke people down, most of the time they tend to be higher health, and you're going to get value out of this rune more often than not. Now, obviously the max amount of damage that it, could do, it's been reduced basically by close to half, but the ease of proccing it, now you can build into HP yourself, right? And it doesn't matter at all. It's just about their percentage of HP, which is kind of nice. So now I can really use this with the other with all the other stuff that I have, basically, right? Like with all the stuff that I want to use, like I can use it with double scaling health. I can use it with Liandry's. So I think I'm going to be testing this quite a bit, and I think it has the potential to be really good, to be honest. I much prefer this over the other one because, like I said, I tend to like to start fights, and I think that also, even barring the starting fights aspect, like when you're poking people in the mid game, they're not sticking around to be executed when they get to like 40%. They're basing, especially if they're squishy or something like that. So in a lot of cases, you really are leaning into this, like hitting targets above 60%. Like you're not even trying to do it intentionally. It's just kind of going to be how the circumstances of the game play out. So I think this could be really good, especially once you start to get levels in your abilities and stuff like that. So I'm definitely looking forward to play testing this and trying this tomorrow. So I think definitely going this option as opposed to the sorcery thing, it's it's not bad at all. I think the thing is that it's you will be like a little bit weaker in lane because like until you get some levels in your Q, the 8% damage is not really going to look super great on something that doesn't do a lot of damage to begin with, right? The Scorch is just doing flat damage regardless, right? So it's going to look a little bit better there. So just something to kind of keep in mind about the laning aspect of this. But you probably will have more mana overall with Presence of Mind in terms of like what you're actually regenerating, right? You're just gonna have more mana regeneration in the lane phase. So yeah, we'll have to mess around with that a bit. And finally, the runes, right? The actual little runes. So for me, it's not even a question. I always take the 8 ability haste here over the ability power. For me, I just think that I know my build doesn't get a ton of ability haste, so this kind of compensates for that a bit. And ability haste, like it's basically almost like 1-to-1 with ability power for this tier of rune, and I'll take the ability haste any day of the week. Right, if it's like 8 ability haste versus 9 adaptive damage. The only time I would take the adaptive damage is like in a case where I was like farming or something, right? If I'm trying to hit a specific threshold to be able to like one-shot a wave at a certain point. So this is more of a thing on AD or mid Xerath. But if you're playing support Xerath, in my opinion, there's really no reason to take the that super minuscule amount of AP over the ability haste. And then in terms of the second, I think everybody takes scaling health in the third bracket, but I take the health over the ability power in the second bracket as well, because in my opinion, just 180 health is going to be way more impactful. There's way more situations. You're not going to have the full 180. You're probably going to have like 140 or something by the mid game, obviously, because it scales like at level 14, you have 140, etc. 13, 130. So you're going to have around that amount of extra health, but I think that's way more likely to be the difference maker, especially because you're not tending to put yourself in cases where everybody is allowed to pile on you, right? So if you're playing Xerath properly, you're playing him in a way where you're making people work to kill you, and when they're not getting perfect setups on you and perfect damage on you, that's where things like this really come into play, right? Like obviously, if you let an Echo drop his W on you and just like walk on top of you and completely full combo you and auto you, you're probably going to die no matter what. But if you're able to bait out some abilities, dodge some abilities, you don't get completely locked down, and you're just taking like stray shots, then that gives these like little bit of HP margins a lot more room to kind of work, obviously, right? Than if you're just letting yourself get completely plowed. So I think like the better you're playing, the smaller HP margins tend to come into play more. So that's kind of why I bet on myself and I take the double scaling health there. And I think that actually you're kind of surprisingly tanky as support when you have I wouldn't use the word that you're tanky at all, but like you're just tankier than people expect when you have a Leandries with 300 plus health. You have 2 of these scaling runes, and then you have 200 flat health on the support item. People are kind of like, what is this? Like, why is this guy not dead? Right? So, as long as you're not getting completely ISO'd and soloed, you kind of stand a pretty good chance of surviving in fights, which can be really good when you're trying to maximize things like Darksteel Magi's too, right? So, it's kind of my thought process there on the runes. And, yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching this. Sorry this was a little bit of a longer one. We try and keep them short, but there's kind of a lot to go over in this because there's new stuff, right? So yeah, like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed it, and have fun tomorrow when the patch comes out, and I'll see you guys next time.